Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast, brought to you by JSL Solutions. The Church Solutions Podcast is designed to help equip you and your church in the use of technology and other tools and services. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Lacy and Phil Thompson.
And welcome to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.
Hi, I'm Steve Lacy.
Is that your name? Are you sure about that?
I am sure, and I know how to pronounce it.
Yeah. All right, we won't go there. Well, I'm Phil Thompson, and welcome, folks, to another podcast. So we are, very quickly, we are a tech company that likes to do podcasts.
Yes.
We do lots of things in the areas of...
We provide live streaming for churches, mobile apps for churches, and church management systems.
All right, good deal. And Steve and I have been involved in church work for pretty much all our lives. And that's a long time. We won't say how old we are, but we've been involved in ministry and helping our churches and on staff and all that good stuff over the years.
Yeah. Some of us have been senior pastors.
Yeah, some of us have been senior pastors until they got kicked out, and then they moved away. But so anyhow, we love helping churches. We love helping ministries and volunteers and those kind of things. That's why we do this podcast. So, who is our guest today, Steve Lacy?
So today we have a special guest, Brad Duryea.
Brad Duryea. Yeah, good. I'm glad you got his name right.
Yes, Brad. Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, we're glad to have you. So Brad is actually, he works with the audio. He's like an audio engineer guy, one of those techie guys that works for kind of a small church. It's called Lakewood Church out of Houston, Texas. And you guys got, what do you got, about 40, 50 people that show up on a weekend?
50 to 60 on a good day.
Yeah.
It's just sort of laid back and.
Yeah. Depends on the weather. So we're giving Brad a hard time here because we can. But Lakewood Church, in case you don't know, is out of Houston, Texas, and there's a guy by the name of Joel Osteen who is the senior pastor. And actually, I used to watch his father. That shows you how old I am, John Osteen. Years ago. But Joel Osteen's church. Seriously, what do you guys run? Do you guys run about 10,000 on the weekend?
About 40,000.
40,000. Okay. And I do know this, at least I've been told this, that there's like 20 million people that watch a month in over 100 countries. And I think, and I don't know if that stat is accurate or not, but that's what I got.
It's sort of, so we are in about 110 countries. And then in America, the Nielsen certified viewership is about 10 million per episode.
Wow. That's incredible. That is just amazing. So Brad, thanks for spending some time with us. And I got to ask you, how did you get this gig?
I was begging on the street for an audio gig. I'm, well mixed for food. It's funny how this turned out because, I'm not sure where to start in the story, but I think the easiest point is just that I was already a tech director at another church, and it's a great church, and I had a great time there, and I wasn't looking to leave, but I had this idea that Houston's a big spread out city. There's thousands of churches, and smaller churches don't often have a lot of good tech resources. They may not have very highly trained people. Right. They may not have access to a lot of training resources. And so I just felt like my heart was that, there were a lot of big churches that could help the small churches get better at doing tech arts. And so I was talking to other churches, including Lakewood, to see if they would want to be part of this little group where we would all take turns hosting different seminars for free that the smaller churches could come to and learn and improve. And so when I had lunch with who is now my boss here at Lakewood, Reed Hall, and pitched the idea to him, he liked it, and we hit it off. And he said, "Have you ever seen Lakewood Church?" And I was like, "Well, no, I've never actually had a chance to get out there." So he took me back for a quick tour, and I had very limited time. I had a meeting I had to get to, so back at my church. So I, unfortunately, it was kind of rushed. But he put up some multi-track content on the console in the arena, and let me build a mix. And so, of course, I'm thinking, man, this is the coolest. I'm getting a mix on the PA at Lakewood in an arena on this crazy console I've never used before. It was a Euphonics System 5. It's really a broadcast console. So it's sort of an unusual choice. So I had to kind of learn how to move around on it. And I just sort of built a mix up on it and went, wow, cool. It actually sounds kind of cool in here. This is fun. And so he, I had to get back to this appointment. So he walks me out to my car, and in the parking lot, he just offered me a job.
Nice.
Wow.
So I don't think that either of us went to this lunch expecting that sort of outcome. I know he didn't do it for him, it wasn't an interview in disguise, and it certainly wasn't me searching for a job. But when he pitched the offer, and then we started really talking a bunch about what it would look like, and I realized it was just too good of an opportunity. So, So I took it.
So that's really interesting. Tell me about the vision you had for training up smaller churches. What happened to that?
Yeah, that sort of failed.
Oh, it did, huh? I would think.
But here's, I love, my heart has always been to help train people one way or another. Uh-huh. So I still get to regularly help out with churches and individual engineers and either mentor or help do training sessions and things like that. And so I still love to do that. But once I took on the job here, the time commitment necessary to sort of run that project wasn't practical, unfortunately. Yeah. And so no, that
are there things that would transfer from the large church to the smaller church that I would think that smaller churches go, well, sure, if I had a $400,000 budget, I could have great sound, but I assume that what you're talking about is some things just some advice and expertise that you could share with smaller churches, or.
Yeah, and I don't know how much time you'd like me to spend on this particular answer, but I could go off in a whole lot of tangents here. But I'll give you a few key things. It's never about the gear. The budget does have an impact. Obviously, for any given size room, there's some amount of money that it takes to do sound well. So it's we can all agree that you've got to spend at least some amount of money to get decent loudspeakers and to have decent acoustic treatment and that sort of thing. But in the end, as long as you have basic functioning stuff, it isn't about the gear anymore. There are so many other things that affect good sound. And the tastefulness of the audio engineer's mix, and not even necessarily the microphones themselves. Sometimes just where they're placed and how they're being used, and what the acoustic output from the stage, and by which I mean the musicians themselves, and what their instruments sound like and how good they are as musicians. Most of the things that affect what we hear are in the non-electronic domain. I mean, it's the acoustics of the room, it's the quality of the instruments, the tuning of the instruments, the playing of the musicians, all of these things that have honestly the biggest impact of all. And there's no electronics involved at that point. So, yeah, the principles of being a good audio engineer extend beyond just, do I have cool technology and do I know how to turn the knobs? For me, there's three layers to being a good audio engineer. And this is where this applies to every church, big or small, every audio engineer, no matter what sort of genre of work they're doing, whether they're doing sports broadcasting or church front of house mixing or working in the club or whatever. The first and the most important one to me is the interpersonal aspect of being an audio engineer, because an audio engineer is not just someone who knows how to push the right button. An audio engineer knows how to work with the talent to get the best results. And so that means, making people feel comfortable, understanding what the expectations are, on some level, becoming buddies, maybe not literally, but in a sense that there's a sense of trust, and rapport and good communication, so that
between the performers and okay.
Yeah, and that way the performers know what they can expect and what's available, and what the limitations of what's available are, and what they expect, and they know that you as an audio engineer, you're working to do the best results you can. And when you make an effort to have good interpersonal relationships with people and good communication skills, everything else is just easier. Everything else goes a lot more smoothly. People are more willing to accept your suggestions. So that's an absolutely critical part of honestly of being a good audio engineer, and it's what gets you hired again for gigs, because people hire people they like to work with.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
That is the number one thing, especially on tour kind of stuff. Anything where they just want people they know. I just know this guy's going to work, so I'm just going to hire him because I don't want to think about it. They want people that show up on time, have a good attitude, are easy to work with. So literally the number one thing is interpersonal. So that alone transcends. It doesn't matter if you're a small church or a big church, you have a big budget or a small budget, or if you have an analog console or a digital console. None of that matters. If the interpersonal thing isn't working out right, then it's never going to be smooth and it's never going to be great. So that's one layer. The technical layer is another one, of course. It's what equipment do I have and how well do I know how to use it? And you do have to know on some level how to get around on the gear pretty well. But I have mixed shows before, kid you not, on like an analog Mackie 1604 mixer, which, you know, is if you don't know that model number, it's a little teeny tiny analog mixer that sits on top of a table. It's probably, you know, a foot and a half wide, and it's has I guess 16 inputs. That's kind of implied by the model number, but it's really about 12, and then a few outputs. And you can mix on anything. You really can. It's just about, you know, live sound is all about compromise anyway, because there's always something fighting against something else. The room acoustics are always going to have some contributing factor to the overall sound. The bleed from instruments, from mics, you know, from one instrument to another's mic is going to be an issue. The SPL level you can get out of a vocalist versus feedback, you know, is going to. So there's always compromises going on. So it's just about pulling the best out of the technology that you have in front of you, and not about so much blaming the technology, but just make it work, because you can make it work in almost every scenario. The only thing that the nicer tools give you is a little more flexibility, maybe faster ability to get to the results you want. And yeah, there will be some level of refinement you can get with the nicer equipment, but going from a $10,000 mixer to a $100,000 mixer does not make your mix sound 10 times better. It probably makes your mix sound 10 or 20% better. But it's, you know, when you're in that level, you can afford to buy that stuff and have that flexibility and those features, and that extra polish may make all the difference in the world. So the tech, it's too easy to focus too much on what tech you have, rather than what you can get out of the tech that you have. And so that's the second layer of being an audio engineer is technical. So interpersonal, technical, and then artistic. Artistic is all about your ear and your sense of taste as a mix engineer. And I think mixing is really sort of an artistic process. And that, again, has nothing to do with what size church you're in or what equipment you have. It's all about what do you hear? How well do you perceive the music that you're hearing in terms of, you know, picking it apart in your head and going, there's this issue with the bass guitar. There's this thing going on with the electric guitar. But if I balance them in this way, it's cool. So there's a very much an artistic side where, you know, of course, having some musical background helps, but it's not absolutely necessary as an audio engineer, so that you can take what you're getting and find an artistic way to blend it together, and get something pretty, right, you know, so to speak, out of the result. And that is purely a taste thing. It's really just artistic taste at that point, regardless, again, of what equipment you're on.
So my experience with just working with a bunch of different churches, typically the thing that appeals to the guy that's running sound is the tech part. So you get these techie guys that may not have the best social skills or artistic skills at all. Is there what advice would you have for the church working with those guys, or, you know, is there something that can be done to improve those other skills?
Some courses on interpersonal relationship, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, the thing is, the interpersonal skill thing is the hardest to get, I think, because if you are, and Steve, I've seen, I feel you, because I've definitely seen a lot of that too. If you've got someone who just doesn't have that personality, you can't teach that. You can maybe
Right.
point out some areas they can work on refinement, or maybe point out some ways they can communicate a little differently. But yeah, when that's absent, it's often going to be a problem for the whole team in general. And the way that tends to play out is, the guy may, he knows the technology, but the musician, when a musician says, "Hey, this doesn't sound right," but instead of using a talkback mic, he might just shout back to the stage, "Well, it is right. I got the knob in the right place," and that's not an answer. Like, if a musician ever tells you, "Hey, this doesn't sound right," then your job is to go, "Oh man, hey, I don't know why. I'm sorry. I think it's set right, but I'm gonna investigate because I want to make you happy."
Yeah.
Right.
Like, that's the way you handle that. And then they go, "Oh, cool. He cares,"
Right.
And so it is, I don't know how you make someone have a better interpersonal relationship other than gently sort of, when you witness that behavior, you do have to, I think you gently, push them in the right direction and say, look, here's how I might handle the situation. Or even, if some people get offended, even if you just try to say, hey, I think you should have done it this way. So you might even it's possible that you could build into the process of recruiting volunteers or training people, hey, let's have some role play examples of situations that have happened before, just so we can all learn from them. And we can all go, oh, this is a good example of how not to behave. Shouting back to the stage, by the way, for example, is a huge pet peeve of mine. It's never worth it, because even if you're really good friends already with the musicians, I've had situations where I was, because I've learned the hard way from my own actions, friends of mine on the stage, and I'll yell back something just completely innocuous, but the fact that you have to raise your voice to yell means that in this one particular case, there was someone else in the room I didn't realize was in the room at the time. And this person complained to someone else that I was being rude to the band. And then it came around and it became a big deal, and finally simmered down once everyone realized what was going on. I'm like, this person shouldn't have been in the room, and they didn't understand the context of what was going on.
Right.
And I have to yell 100 feet away, and it wasn't. And we're all friends too. So there was no animosity, but people misinterpret. If a stranger can misinterpret that, a band member who's up there, maybe insecure, maybe not used to playing in front of people. Lots of artists, even experienced ones, get a little nervous when they're in front of people, or get nervous before a gig, and yelling things for even in the most innocuous way is bad. So even just learning to use a talkback mic and talk gently, or have another person on stage wearing a comm headset who can relay things. That alone interpersonally makes things better. But so, I think, some role play could definitely help.
So next time, keep Joel Osteen out of the auditorium when you're going through that stuff. It won't happen anymore. Yeah,
that guy. I mean, he just gets in everyone's business.
Yeah. So does he ever give you a dirty look when something doesn't sound good?
Amazingly, no. He's so. I mean, he is the coolest guy. He is genuinely as laid back as you see on television. That's not a character for him. That is his actual persona, and he is that nice and laid back in real life, and so is his wife and his kids. I mean, they're amazing. And so when things do go wrong, I love the way he handles things. If there's something goes wrong, like the rare instance of feedback or a mic failure, because it happens even for us, and the first time something like that happens in a given weekend, he won't say anything. He never mentions it, because he knows that we already know about it. It's obvious when a problem happens, so we don't need someone glaring at, And of course, he's not mad in the first place, but he knows it doesn't do any good to send someone back to the booth to go, "Hey guys, what's going on?" Because we're in the middle of trying to fix it. So I do find that silly when pastors of their churches get on people's case like that. It's kind of cringy to me, the guy knows he just heard it. He was the sound guy. Of course he knows that just happened. So
everyone turned around.
Let him
look back at the sound booth.
Exactly. But no, the first time it'll happen, Joel will not. He won't say anything. The second time it happens, he might ask out of curiosity, say, oh, well, it'd be okay if that didn't happen again. That's his really nice way of saying, please don't let that happen again. He'd say, it'd be just fine if that didn't happen again. The third time, he's like, maybe we should all meet.
All right, good deal. So, by the way, have you ever been to his house?
I have.
Ooh, all right, good deal. All right, well, I'm just being facetious here, but
so back on our original topic, I think one of the things what I'm taking away from what you're saying is leadership needs to set the expectation that the guy driving AV, if he has the technical skills, that's only 1/3
right.
of what you really need, and just pointing out the fact that there's 3 key things you need for this job, that it's going to raise the awareness for those that may be weak in one of the other areas. I ran sound once for a very short time.
They fired you then.
Yeah, they fired me, and I think I was completely missing the artistic piece. So I have a son who plays guitar in a band, and so he got all the genes that I had none of. So I could handle the technical, and I wasn't terrible with the interpersonal, but the artistic side, it was like, I'm sure they go, that kid doesn't have a good ear.
I also like what you brought up, Brad, about the equipment, because I've helped start some churches and we had poor equipment, and I even have helped the privilege of helping start a couple of radio stations and we had poor equipment. But if you can make it work and you can learn how to do it and make it work, then it kind of prepares you for when eventually you can get better equipment, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's a very important part. I think those are really good points. So, I mean, let me back up the clock here a little bit and say, okay, so you've been running audio, video, well, maybe not video. You do some audio, video post-production, right?
I do a lot of post-production. Yeah. During the week, I do mostly post-production for the church.
Yeah. But getting back to that, I mean, have you been doing this since you were like a little kid, or how did you actually get into it? Okay. So you started, and again, you started probably with a church or what?
So I didn't know then that audio was my thing, but this was looking back, it's like obvious to me now that audio was going to be my thing. And it was when I was about 9 years old, my dad had a hi-fi system, all the separate components, a separate tuner and cassette deck and, record player and a graphic EQ and an amplifier. And it was I think it was a 10-band graphic EQ. It may have only been 7, but I think it was 10 bands. And it was, and I remember up until that point in my life, he would never let me touch this thing because it was a really expensive hi-fi rig. And he had the characteristic smiley face curve on the graphic EQ, because of course, that's the best way. That's the sound. Why do they even let you move the sliders? Why even let you move them? Because anyway, so, around 9, he started to trust that I could use it. And I remember thinking, this doesn't sound right. Like why would you put the sliders like this? This is weird. I flattened them out and thought, oh wow, that's way better. And then I started listening to every record I'd listen to, I would think that I needed to make little tiny tweaks on the graphic EQ to get it just right. And I would, some little tiny boosts, little tiny cuts, but some real subtle things. I would even fuss over little tiny movements that like the slider would move too far for me, and I'd like try to get it just exactly where I want it. And then I had a notebook and I would write down the EQ curves I was using for each record. Wow. But it seemed totally normal to me at the time. I had no, it just was like, I'm like, I just want the record. Each record sounds a little different. I want it to sound the best it possibly can. And when I listen to it, it's just for my own enjoyment. And so I just, did these little subtle EQ curves and took notes. And now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, that's clearly a sign. But back then it just seemed like totally natural to do.
It's either a sign or something was wrong with you. But
something was horribly wrong and undiagnosed all these years. So then when I was in junior high, I would have been probably 12 at the time, I think. And I was in choir. We had a PA in the auditorium. And no one knew how to use it, and I was fascinated by it because I was like, "Ooh, that looks like I'm a nerd. That looks like fun to twist those knobs and figure that out." So no one knew how to use it, so I would just sneak off during choir class and try to make it work. And I finally figured it out. And I made a lot of stupid mistakes along the way, but I just figured it out until it worked. And And then I was able to get it up and running. Then I was able to figure out how to make the wedges work. And then I realized, it occurred to me that, hey, when you turn the mic up in the wedges, sometimes it makes this nasty sound that I don't like. But if I turn these knobs, if I figure out where to turn these knobs, sometimes it makes it go away. So I was figuring out how to ring out wedges without realizing what I was even doing. So learning what the EQ would do. And then it occurred to me that the wedges themselves needed to have their own master EQ on them, because doing it on the channel strip wasn't good enough, but there was no EQ available. And then I realized, if I look at the back of the board, look, there's these insert. I don't know it didn't know what insert meant at the time, but there was this way to patch around the graphic EQs that were on the output buses of the console, on the left and right output buses of the console. And so then I realized, well, I could deal with the PA being in mono. Let's just make the PA mono so I can have the right side. I can take over its EQ and use it for the wedge mixes instead. And so I figured out how to patch on the back of the console to do that, so I could EQ the wedges. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, now they really work well,
And so how old were you then?
12.
Do what now?
You were 12? How old back when you were doing this?
12.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just did it because I was curious, and I wanted to learn it as well as I could. It was fascinating to me, and I was just trying to solve problems, but I just didn't know what the problems were even called, or I didn't know what I was doing other than trying my hardest to solve these little issues and explore. So anyway, so that when I got into, so I did that, and people figured out that I knew how to run the PA. And so I started to do every event. The school, automatically I became the default sound guy for everything. And that snowballed into high school, and I got involved in different production companies, sort of helping out, just doing gigs and then some studio work, and then church contract work.
Yeah.
And then teaching some classes at a local community college on audio while doing church contract work, while then starting to get into some consulting work, designing sound systems, because the nerd side of me has always been hungry to learn more and more stuff. So on the side, I'm reading, books and things about other areas of audio and trying to learn from other people that do things like design PAs. And so eventually get into sort of doing that, some of that help. That all sort of turns into a church gig where I was the tech director, and that's the job I had prior to this one here at Lakewood. And that job kind of rolled all of those skills into one, because I had to be able to, teach people and recruit people and understand the tech and the artistic side, and then learn video and lighting. Yuck. No, I'm just kidding. That was fun. It was fun for me to learn the rest of that kind of stuff and understand how they all fit together a little better. And so did that for a while, and then the Lakewood thing came about.
Awesome. So we're pretty much out of time here, but we're talking with Brad Duryea, and Brad, he's with Lakewood Church out of Houston, Texas. Brad, how can people, read your material, get a hold of you? Do you have a blog? Do you have a way people could contact you?
Yeah. So there's a few ways. Twitter is an easy way to do it, and my Twitter account is just at Brad Duryea, which the last name is spelled Duryea. But people can email me at brad.duryea@gmail.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn, which has a list of articles I've written. There'll be one coming out in Church Production Magazine for Easter productions coming up here in a month or two, and then several more from a few other publications later this year. But yeah, Twitter and email are certainly really easy ways to reach me.
Awesome. Well, good stuff, Brad. You gave us some really good stuff. We love the 3 layers there, and we really do appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. And would you put in a good word for us with Joel?
I will. He doesn't. I mean, he already told me I shouldn't do it because he doesn't like you guys. But I'll
well, we've had our differences over the years, but
I'll tell him. Look, they've changed, Joel.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. Appreciate your sense of humor, and appreciate what you're doing for the kingdom of God. And we're out of time. So if you have some comments, something you want to add to this, folks, just send us an email, support@StreamingChurch.tv, because we're those kind of guys. We love to support people. So support@StreamingChurch.tv. Love to get your feedback. And Brad, again, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, and thank you for listening. The guy across the table from me is Steve Lacy. I'm Phil Thompson. We'll catch you next time on another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. Take care.